The first case study for designing interaction for diverse cohorts, learning and teaching practice, comes to us from Professor Sophie Arkoudis. Sophie is an Associate Director of the Melbourne Centre for the Study of Higher Education and an Associate Professor in Higher Education at the University of Melbourne. Her research interest broadly focuses on student experience in higher education, and it spans English language teaching and assessment, curriculum design, student employability, the teaching research nexus, and internationalising the curriculum. This case study derives from the latter of those interests, for Sophie will be providing highlights to us of her Interaction for Learning framework, which is an output of her research on local and international student interaction within teaching and learning contexts.
Thank you, Pauline, and it's a pleasure to be here presenting the Interaction for Learning framework to you, and hopefully to whet your appetite a bit and inspire you to go and look at the resources and see what more can be done in the classroom. Now, I think I'm going to start off by painting a little bit of the Australian context for you, which I don't think is too dissimilar from what is happening worldwide in higher education, and that is that this issue of interaction has become a really critical issue for all of us that are working with diverse student groups. And part of the problem tends to be for us in Australia, the divide that exists between domestic and international students. The fact that international students want to make friends with local students and have very little opportunities to do this. The fact that our domestic cohorts are also spending less time on campus as they need to work more and be financially more capable of completing their studies. And what's been really interesting is lately this issue of employability, which has been a big issue in higher education across the world, has focused on teamwork, effective communication skills, collaborative work of graduates, more so than the disciplinary knowledge and content that graduates bring out of their degree. And these are exactly the type of skills that we're seeking to develop in our students if we can get them to engage more collaboratively with colleagues in the classroom and use those opportunities for learning. So that's really been the focus of this project. The resources and more information and a lot more detailed case studies and examples are available in the guide that can be downloaded from the website that you can see on your screen. But I'm just going to take you very quickly through what some of the key characteristics are. Now, when we did this project, we initially went out and talked to academic staff about what is it that they do in their classroom, and basically they said not much. So we actually started to unpack what the not much meant, and we found out that there was a lot going on. It's just that people did not think about it in terms of interaction for learning, in terms of engaging diverse student groups. And so we found that there were 6 dimensions that were critically important to orchestrating a sort of an atmosphere within the classroom where interaction was important, and it was important for learning. I'm going to take you through those 6 dimensions and talk about what some of the strategies and examples were in each of those dimensions, and emphasize that within the framework, people can engage with it very light touch, so do a few of the dimensions and be involved in that, or they can go for all the 6 dimensions and really try to foster an environment of cooperative learning in the classroom. Let's start with the first one. So we found that academics who told us about what they did in the classroom actually planned for interaction. They didn't see it as an incidental or something that might occur or something that is just a situation where you just say to students, oh, well, just get in a group together and discuss this and make it unfocused in that way. But they actually used planning strategies around interaction to engage students in learning. They were purposeful, and they were designed to actually get students in groups to learn together rather than to simply talk together. So we found that there were particular focuses that academics placed on this. They emphasised that it was really important to work collaboratively in groups together, and why this was important given that we live in a global environment where we're all going to be working with people from different ethnic backgrounds, and we have to engage in different ways of communicating and understanding effectively. They also mentioned that if it's not planned, it won't happen. And in particular, if it's not incorporated in some way into the assessment process, students will actually think that it's not that necessary to do. Now, this has been a really interesting point because a lot of higher education research points to the importance of assessment that guides student learning. And with the interaction framework, we felt that it was important that there was some emphasis on assessment and on learning for students in order for them to know how to engage and the benefits of this for their own learning experiences. And so in very serious way, the planning for interaction becomes the centre, the nucleus of the framework. Without that happening, many other things might happen incidentally, but would not be planned in terms of teaching and learning practices that will align to assessment of student learning. When we get to creating environments for interaction rather, one of the really important things here is, as with any situation, it's really critical that in the classroom environment, students are given opportunities to talk to each other. And it might sound very simple, but in actual fact, in a lot of the work that I do, it astounds me how often academics are talking a lot to students, but are not really focusing on what students are doing. And so the emphasis here is on creating introductions, icebreaker activities, short little problem-solving activities, some type of discussion that can happen early on in the first tutorial or the first lecture to engage students in talking to each other, to make them feel comfortable about that, to see that this is an environment or a classroom where talking is going to be important, because we all know that it's very critical to discuss students' understandings of their particular issues or ideas that are being discussed in class, and to actually unpack some of their misunderstandings as well. And this is very important that it happens within social settings between students in groups. So we found that this was a critical first step. It's something that happens a lot in classroom teaching, and it's something that can be geared more explicitly to make students aware that the point of this is to create a more interactional learning environment. Along with that, it's important to support interaction. For example, we found that many of the academics that we talked to have set very clear expectations regarding why they see peer interaction as important, what it means to engage successfully in peer interactions and actually incorporate a session on it in their classroom teaching, and provide resources for students. And this sort of cuts across a lot of the literature on group work that has happened in higher education, where this isn't just simply getting together and talking about things. This is more about having a purpose for talking. And the students themselves said that an effective way of bridging the cultural divide that can exist amongst students is to focus attention more on the classroom teaching and learning, where they've got something in common that they can engage with, rather than focus on just putting them together in groups and assuming that they're going to work. So it's got to be more crafted and more skilled in that way. So if we then go, so those first three stages are what we would call the more soft end approach in the framework. They can be easily, they're strategies that can be easily put in place. People can incorporate these into their own style of teaching that they're with at the moment, and it doesn't require a lot of rethinking about what you're doing in the classroom, but it maximises opportunities for students to be talking with each other. And it lays the groundwork for the next section, the next dimension, which is engaging with subject knowledge. And here we get into the issues of students working more collaboratively together on different sorts of activities that can occur in the classroom to really strengthen their understanding and really enhance their learning. And this is what we found in the project, both from students and from academic staff. So we need discussion-based activities, but discussion-based activities that really try to draw in understandings from different perspectives, different backgrounds, different cultural issues that might emerge. So, for example, there were lots of really good examples we got from the medical faculty when they do clinical practice, and they actually get students to get up and talk about how they would react to what's going on from their own cultural background perspective. And that was really interesting example. Another aspect of this has also been the student peer review process, and peer review is also an effective way of trying to get students to share their understandings and ideas with each other, offer feedback. But in order to do effective peer review, you also have to teach students how to give and take feedback, what effective feedback should be like, and what it really requires. And importantly, it really focuses on trying to get students to understand the importance of how, when you work together and you discuss issues together, it can actually enhance your learning. But along with that comes certain responsibilities that we also need to put in place as academics to make sure that these teams work effectively. And some of these examples that we got from our survey were things like putting in place, negotiating with students what the expectations were of working together, what was expected of every team member, and in actual fact, what would happen, not the penalty, but the consequences would be if certain team members didn't fulfil their part of the obligation. So actually negotiating what people are going to be doing, what's expected of them, and what will happen when that doesn't occur as well. Okay, so if we move on to the next part, the last two sections were the sections that we had very few examples of, and that was because many of these happened in classrooms where academics were really engaged with intercultural learning and were really pushing it with their students. So, but we put these in place as well because we saw these as really important to guide people as to what the potential might be. So developing reflective processes really focuses on the students using their experiences of working together, of learning together, to reflect on the skills that they have developed themselves, about effective teamwork, about what it takes to communicate effectively with other students, how to be an effective sort of listener in that type of environment, how to reflect on the strengths that they've also gained from that. And given that a lot of the students that we're working with are going to be working in team-based projects when they go out into the workforce, this is actually considered very, very important for them to be able to reflect, to give them the skills to be able to talk about what it is that they learn and what they can contribute to different learning situations. And the last one, fostering communities of learners, was really about developing communities of practice. So we saw instances where students were working not only collaboratively in the classroom, but actually working outside of the classroom together as well, sharing information, sharing ideas, problem solving, using discussion boards, Facebook all those sorts of issues, all those sorts of online tools that were really effective to try to take the learning out of the classroom and into the broader context. And that's where we saw, when we were interviewing the students that were engaged in this type of activity, true sharing of ideas. So we had examples where there would be, for example, we had a Chinese student who would be helping one of the colleagues develop their Mandarin skills because they were wanting to learn another language, and in exchange that their colleague would be giving them further lessons in English or opportunities to speak English or take them out socially in order to engage in that way. So there was a real sharing of ideas, and that seemed to work really effectively. But as I said, there were fewer examples of this. I'm not going to go too much into the principles of the framework. I've got it there just to sort of indicate some of the ideas and concepts behind what guided the project and what we aim to do. But recently we've been sort of thinking a lot about why this is important work. And we feel that in many ways the employability capabilities are central to the Interaction for Learning framework. And they are the type of, if you like, soft skills that everyone talks about, that we're constantly trying to develop in our students, and they're more visible in this. We also feel that assessment has to be a part of this in order to be taken seriously by students, and there are many strategies of how this can be done in the materials available. And also, given that course coordinators or program coordinators are critical for responsibilities around graduate outcomes, and graduate outcomes as being a big focus in higher ed at the moment, we also think that there should be a lot more focus on the role that course coordinators can play in guiding academic staff, offering professional development and leading people down the pathway to incorporating a bit more of the Interaction for Learning framework. As I said, this is a very quick tour of what the framework offers. There's further reading there for you, but I hope I've given you a taster of the project, and I hope you will delve into the resources and the DVD that's available on the website that goes into more details about some of the practical strategies that you can use in your classroom. And thank you very much for this opportunity to speak.